Want to know what only the top 1% teach their kids about money? Let's play a game. Build your own generational wealth. From medieval knights to modern-day moguls, we would uncover the strategies to preserving and growing wealth across generations. So get ready for a crash course in legacy building. Trust fund history. The concept of trusts dates back to the 12th century during the time of the Crusades. English knights, before leaving for war, would transfer ownership of their land to trusted individuals, hence the term trustees, to manage their property and ensure their families could still benefit from it. However, many of these trustees refused to return the land after the knight's death, leading to legal battles. The courts of equity in England eventually formalized the idea of a trust, recognizing the rights of beneficiaries even if they were not the legal owners. The rise of trusts. By the 19th and 20th centuries, as governments introduced estate taxes, the wealthy adapted by using trusts to protect their fortunes. The US first implemented an estate tax in 1797, though it was repealed and reinstated several times before the modern system took shape in 1916, targeting large inheritances. In response, wealthy families established trusts, such as the Rockefellers, who established the 1934 Family Trust to preserve and pass down their wealth while minimizing taxes. And I know what you're thinking. Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, and other wealthy dynasties are just supervillains hoarding their riches, right? It's easy to paint them as the bad guys, but let's be honest. If you had a fortune and the ability to protect it, would you willingly hand over 40% of it to the government? Probably not. The truth is, it's not about being rich. It's about having power. The truly powerful, those with influence over legislation and loopholes, aren't the ones targeted by these sky-high inheritance taxes. Instead, it's people like John. The hidden side of the estate tax. Back in the day, John started small, buying a land, bit by bit, for $200,000. He took out loans, built a house, and poured years of work into cultivating the land. Along the way, John contributed significantly through corporate and federal taxes, which played a role in the regional development that has boosted the area's prosperity. Partly thanks to this development and broader economic trends like inflation, the land's value has skyrocketed, now reaching a staggering $20 million. Now, John wants to pass this valuable asset on to his children, Mike and Sarah. Without a trust. If John doesn't have a trust and passes away, the farmland is part of his estate. The estate tax will be calculated based on the current value of the land, which is $20 million. In 2025, the basic exclusion amount for estate tax is $13,990,000. Since the land's value exceeds this threshold, the taxable portion of John's estate is $6,010,000. With an estate tax rate of 40%, John's heirs would owe $2,404,000 in estate taxes. But that's not the only issue, there's also capital gains. Because John bought the land for $200,000, there's a significant increase in value of $19.8 million. If John leaves the land directly to his heirs, they will inherit the property at its current market value of $20 million, but they will also inherit the capital gains tax liability from the increase in value, the difference between $200,000 and $20 million. They would owe capital gains taxes on the increase in value, $19.8 million. If the long-term capital gains tax rate is 20%, the tax would be $3,960,000. The heirs now face a staggering $6,364,000 in taxes, $2,404,000 in estate tax and $3,960,000 in capital gains tax, leaving them with $13,636,000 after taxes if they sell the land for $20 million. The problem is, they don't want to sell it. They're not sitting on a pile of cash, the land is their inheritance, not a liquid asset. To cover this massive tax bill, they would be forced to sell the very property their family worked so hard to build and preserve. Penalizing a family for holding on to and improving an asset, especially when much of its appreciation is due to inflation, is nothing short of punishing responsible financial planning. This undermines the very principles of private ownership and generational progress that contribute to a strong and stable economy. That's why John is looking for a way to ensure that his hard work and legacy aren't undone. Intentionally defective grantor trust. This is why John decided to plan ahead and transferred the land into an intentionally defective grantor trust. In an IDGT, John is considered the grantor, which means he still pays the income taxes on any income generated by the farmland. However, because the land is transferred to the IDGT, it is not part of John's estate when he dies. Therefore, it will not be subject to estate tax. This means that the heirs will avoid paying the 40% estate tax on the $6,010,000 taxable portion of the estate, saving them $2,404,000. Let's break it down. Without a trust, estate tax, $2,404,000. Capital gains tax, $3,960,000 on the $19.8 million appreciation. Total taxes, $6,364,000. Net inheritance, $13,636,000 after selling the land for $20 million. With an IDGT, estate tax, $0. Capital gains tax, $0, since the heirs inherit the land with a step-up in basis to its current value of $20 million, avoiding capital gains tax. Net inheritance, $20 million. So John effectively got rid of the estate tax. Which really makes you wonder, what was the point of having an estate tax in the first place if it's this easy to avoid? And inheritance tax isn't the only thing the rich and powerful can optimize through an IDGT. It works to reduce the income tax as well. Income tax optimization. Through the IDGT, if the farmland generates income, the trust can distribute that income to beneficiaries, reducing the overall tax burden. Instead of John paying taxes on the income at his high rate, the income is distributed to beneficiaries who may be in lower tax brackets. If John is in the 37% tax bracket, while Sarah and Mike are in the 35% bracket, the IDGT allows him to distribute the land's $1.5 million in annual revenue strategically, shifting income to lower brackets. Sarah receives $750,000 and pays $262,500 in taxes. Mike receives $750,000 and pays $262,500 in taxes. Total tax paid, $525,000, compared to $555,000 if John were taxed at 37%. That's a $30,000 annual tax saving for the family. Sure, it might not seem like much next to the $525,000 in total taxes paid, but hey, it's just enough to cover the trustees' fees for managing the IDGT. So at this point, it's basically running for free. The legal protection of assets. In addition, an IDGT shields assets from lawsuits, creditors, and personal disputes. If John is sued and the land is in his name, creditors could seize it. However, if the land is held in a trust, they can't touch it since it legally belongs to the trust. By using an IDGT, John ensures that the wealth stays in the family and is safeguarded for future generations, no matter what. The benefits of offshore trusts. As time went on, Mike married Eva. She's from a country that doesn't tax its citizens on their worldwide income. Unlike the US, Mike, a US citizen, receives distributions from a US trust. He then gifts money to Eva within allowable gift tax limits, which in 2025 is $18,000 per recipient per year. To maintain clear tax separation, Eva keeps all her financial accounts completely independent from Mike's. She sets up an offshore trust in the Cayman Islands to build a stock portfolio, taking advantage of the tax-free environment there. Since Eva isn't a US tax resident, she doesn't owe US taxes on the trust income or gains. Now let's see what happens when that same stock portfolio is held in the US versus offshore. If Mike managed the stock portfolio in the US, any capital gains or dividends would be taxed by the US government. Long-term capital gains are taxed up to 20%, and dividends can be taxed up to 37%. Additionally, Mike would be subject to the 3.8% net investment income tax if his income exceeds $200,000. In the Cayman Islands, the trust pays no taxes on income or capital gains, allowing the stock portfolio to grow tax-free. Since Eva isn't a US tax resident, she isn't taxed on worldwide income, which means no taxes are owed on the trust's income in either the Cayman Islands or the US. Now, Mike and Eva have used every legal loophole to optimize their taxes and keep as much wealth in the family as possible. They can send their kids to Harvard, retire on the beaches of the Cayman Islands, and live more than comfortably. But hold on. Doesn't that make them villains, avoiding their fair share of taxes while the rest of us pick up the slack? Or are they simply smart enough to outplay an unfair system? Now you know how the wealthy protect their money, it's time to learn how they use other people's money to get even richer. Watch how the rich use debt to build wealth next.